Okay. Well, thanks, Brad, and thanks everyone for being part of our Global User Conference. We've come to the last session on our agenda, the world's most riveting panel discussion. That's said a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but we really do try to get as many different questions, and it's all about the questions, as I've always said. You know, the how we're going to stump the stars here that we've got assembled with us. We've got Chad Smith, we've got Carol Ptak, we've got Valeri Carrasco, we've got our own Bernard Milian on the panel, as well as Ivan Lavatelli. Ciao, Ivan, how are you doing today?
Hi. Good, doing good.
Good. Hey, Valeri, good to see you again. You're unmuted. Thanks for your hospitality when I was over there in Switzerland. It was wonderful to visit your site there.
Yeah, Switzerland.
And Carol, can I see you? You gonna show your face?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. All right. And then Chad, how about you? Good to see you again.
You as well.
All right. Well, we've been collecting questions. I've thrown in a few myself, just kind of as a little bit of a warm-up question here to kind of get the dialogue going. You know, the pandemic's been a very, very challenging and frustrating and at the same time interesting experience, at least from my vantage point. You know, that just the things that have occurred over the last, 24, 25 months have just been a bit of an eye-opener. So, and as I've gone through, you know, and meeting friends and other colleagues and clients and stuff like that, everybody seems to have their own unique anecdote, something that happened that was just kind of, you wouldn't believe this or that or whatever. So, Chad, why don't we start with you? What, if you look at the pandemic period, and I'm not really thinking of it from a supply chain standpoint so much, but I'm sure it'll come up. Any unique things that have happened in your life that you just think were interesting or might be fun to share with our audience?
I just think there's a whole sea change in the way that we view things that we've done in the past for decades, the way we've learned, the way we participate in communities. You know, it's caused a restructuring of thinking about how we all relate to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, of course, going to spill over into supply chain management.
I love it. How about for you, Carol?
I think for me, the biggest aha that I had was how fast this thing moved. I was actually in Bogota, Colombia, as things are really starting to heat up worldwide. And in that week that I was there teaching a demand-driven leader class with David Paveda down there, and we watched as the Colombian peso to the US dollar devalued by 40% in 5 days. I mean, that just boggled my mind. And then I was on an 11:45 p.m. flight from Bogota into Houston to come back home. And my plan B was I was going to go hang out in Mexico if America closed her borders. And much to my surprise, when I landed in Houston and there was nobody there, I said, "What happened?" They said, "Well, Colombia closed her borders at midnight." And so here I barely got out of Colombia by like the nick of my tail, and landed in Houston. And then I get back into Phoenix, and I stopped at our little grocery store in Globe, Arizona, at the Safeway there. And I walked in the door and I thought I'd gotten off at the wrong airport. I thought I was in Venezuela because there was no meat, there was no vegetables, there was no dairy, there was no eggs. And grocery shopping turned into, here's the list, see what you can find. Where our normal life would be, we'd go to town maybe once a week because we live very remotely. And now it was a daily challenge of, okay, what can we get? It wasn't, get what's on the list, it's what can you get? So to me, I think the big aha was how fast it all moved.
Yeah.
And it was just, it boggled my mind. I just sort of felt like my tail feathers got clipped as I was heading out of Bogota.
There you go. You're kind of a Houdini actor. You're an escape artist. I love it. How about for you, Valeri?
Yeah.
Any interesting life lesson or observation that you had from the pandemic that kind of crossed your path?
Yeah, I can mention two things. The first thing is that when we were listening, Carol Ptak and Chad Smith talking about the new normal 2 or 3 years ago, was more difficult to understand it. Now everybody understands what is the new normal. And also they understand that this will continue like this during the following years. That's very easy to understand. That the situation that we have now, it will last for the next years.
Yeah.
The second thing is that, at least I said this to our top management, is that all the problems that we have today in supply chain can turn into a competitive advantage towards our competitors.
Yep.
So if we are doing well, if we are able to supply when the others cannot supply, this is a tremendous advantage for our company. So
you got to see the opportunity in it all, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. How about for you, Ivan? Italy was one of the hot spots in the very early days of the pandemic, in right around the northern part of the country near where you're located. So how was that for you?
It was tough, and it's a great pleasure being here. Thanks to all your team. It was really tough at the beginning, and I think that what shocked me is the good thing of the pandemic, and there has been a lot of bad things, you name it. But there have been also a lot of good things. We have increased the speed of some habits and decisions.
Yep.
If you think what Valeri was saying about supply chain became a must for a supply chain competitive advantage perspective, and companies. I've seen companies gaining market shares if well managed in terms of their supply chain planning processes, if well managed in terms of their strategy around supplier management in general. So, and that is kind of setting apart the best from the rest, so to say. And another thing that shocked me is the acceleration I've seen in the normal days of life of my family. So I have 11 years old twins that got absolutely expert in, connecting and working with laptops. So I think this caused an acceleration of 5 to 6 years at least of their digitization. And I've learned also as a consultant that we can do a lot of work remotely, and not necessarily to travel and to spare part in commuting, even if this is a big risk for managing teams.
Yeah.
I think that there are good and bad things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, talk about, we were just launching A2A project in the midst of all of that. And it was amazing, to see just being able to get the work done, but also the human spirit, the collaboration between people, I thought was unbelievable and, really, really remarkable. Bernard, how about for you? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, we had to launch like 300 material planners in A2A live with your software solutions remotely. That was challenging.
It was amazing. So Bernard, how about for you?
There were several remarks. First, pitching the VUCA world, you no longer need to do that. Really simplifies the first contact with any company. Another thing that struck me was that some of the companies we were working with and supporting overreacted at the beginning of the pandemic, and particularly during the first lockdown in Europe. For instance, I'm thinking about one of our customers that the top management was very cost-centric. So as the demand was going down, first in China and in the other countries, they really reduced drastically the capacities in the plant, etc. Although their end market demand was gonna obviously to bounce up quite strong afterwards, and this is what happened. And then they went into a situation with overload and not enough capacity, etc. Just a couple of months after almost shutting down their main plant. So I think that's one of the lessons learned as well of that pandemic, is that companies should adapt gradually and not overreact one way or another. And the third thing is, yeah, definitely, I wouldn't have thought possible, like Valeri depicted earlier on, rolling out a demand-driven transformation globally without traveling and all remote. But yeah, eventually you
Be
can
done. Exactly. I think that's great. And for me, the biggest observation was a couple of things. I think the human spirit element of it, just seeing, the whole world of the population, we were all fighting a common enemy for once. And I thought it was very inspiring to see that just the way people came together to find ways to deal with things, to find solutions and all of that. And I just really remember being really struck by that, especially in the first several weeks and months of the pandemic. And then the other thing I think is that clearly we've established that this VUCA thing is real. And I think the way I personify it is that we've been living within the bullwhip ourselves. I mean, you cannot escape it. And I think it's still going to continue. And we were kind of sharing some observations around that when we did the DDOM session the other day. So going to be interesting to see how the next few months and the next year unfolds, but clearly a lot of great observations that you've shared. All right, so next one I'm going to steer first to Carol and Chad, but the demand-driven movement, as we like to kind of think of it, really got started with DDMRP. And that was kind of the entree into the market in terms of bringing these demand-driven ideas in a new and fresh way. I mean, obviously there had been theory of constraints and lean and some other true pull-based concepts that had been in the market for a while, but the introduction of DDMRP, I think, reinvigorated and brought a whole set of new dimensions to that. And now, obviously, you've followed on and you've introduced the demand-driven operating model, demand-driven S&OP, and the concept of the adaptive enterprise. So my question is really about what are your expectations on, let's start with the rate of adoption of DDOM. And I think of that mostly from the standpoint of bringing production scheduling and execution into the frame. How do you expect that to kind of evolve? Is it going to mirror the pace that you saw with DDMRP? Is it going to be different? What would be your comments and observations about what we should expect around the other dimensions of the demand-driven philosophy?
Well, no matter what I say, I'm going to be wrong. If that's anything.
Forecasts are always wrong, Chad. So
the last 12 years, I think that as long as the DDMRP funnel keeps growing, there really isn't an option to keep progressing and hook other aspects of it, with scheduling, with different sorts of buffering, unless you have a simple, processing environment, distribution environment where, DDMRP is going to, or at least a very mature DDMRP implementation is going to act as if it's a complete DDOM. And I think that's where you're going to see a lot of growth, because it's, and I don't want to oversimplify it, but it's the low hanging fruit.
Right.
That doesn't require a lot of other peripheral things around it. But when you get into the more complex manufacturing, vertical integration, all that stuff, I think DDMRP shows you that you need more. The analytics will tell you need more, or if you want to get better, you're going to have to do something between the decoupling points. I mean, it will lead you there.
Mm-hmm. Carol, anything you want to add there?
I think if anything, what DDI saw last year is we saw a rate of growth that we'd never seen before. We had a record year last year with a level of education, and we're seeing a general acceleration globally. That we now have a good foothold in China, and we're expanding there as well. Latin America, France continues to be strong. And I think as Valeri said, and Ivan said, is that with this new VUCA world, Chad and I have been talking about the VUCA world for years, this new normal, and now everybody believes us, that this is the world that we have to deal with. And so I think demand driven and the community has hit a pivot point of, it used to be, well, have you tried it yet? To now the question is why have you not tried it?
Mm-hmm.
because companies that have embraced this methodology have survived and thrived during this crazy time that we've had the last couple of years. And the other companies are scrambling. I mean, the number of calls that Chad and I are on with execs that are saying, what do we do? The interest that we're getting more and more calls than we've ever had before. So I think that adoption of the DDOM is going to accelerate as people realize that there really is no other choice.
Yeah.
I mean, your other choice is you either learn how to adapt or you're going to die. So there's your two options. So, any executive, which one of those two choices do you want to take?
Yeah. Yep.
What I've noticed too is, we went from this is something that's risky to try to this is something that's risky not to try.
Mm-hmm.
That's the key change that we're observing with the executive leadership.
Yep, absolutely.
And I think now, we spent 3 years writing this sales and operations planning book with Dick. And, and a lot of people say, why would you take 3 years to write a book? And it was because we had to align and harmonize and make sure everything was plugged in and, all the loose ends were tied up. And, and it really took 3 years to do. But it really is now this complete management model on how to run a company that you can sense and adapt to the marketplace and adapt faster than what the marketplace is around you. So I think the book hit the market at exactly the right time of when it was needed.
Absolutely. And I think obviously, to me, one of the biggest takeaways is we need to be building agility into our business instead of we can't rely on prediction as the path to the right answer. We have to instead understand that there will always be this change. As Chad said, we're going to get there. We're going to guess wrong no matter what. And so the more prepared we are and the more agile we are as a business, then obviously we are far less dependent on those forecast signals or other strategies that we've used in the past. It's really going back to just challenging the base assumptions that are out there and finding new ways to address things. Valeri, from a client perspective then, what's your expectation? You've made tremendous progress with your DDMRP rollout. We spent a little time talking about the operating model and DDS and OP, and you had some perspectives on that. Could you share those with us?
Yes, I can share it. So first of all, mention that it's easy to try. It's not complicated to try demand-driven MRP. Something that is an advantage is that we need to involve IT since the very beginning to upload the data with interfaces, but it's really simple to try. It's so simple that we were thinking in using Excel or Business Warehouse for HANA to run it. Here we recommend to use Replenishment Plus because it's cheaper and also easier. Mm-hmm. The second thing is about how we are going to develop. So at least in Merler Toledo, we don't have the 3 legs of the demand-driven operating model. We have only planning and execution. We don't have the scheduling yet. So we are thinking about using the scheduling as well in future. This could be an option. Also in the execution, we need to understand better why we fail. So in demand-driven MRP, we are checking the status of the buffers, what is currently a stock out, what will be a stock out in future, but we need to analyze better why we are stock out in the past and take decisions based on this. From 2023, we have 3 goals for development. The first one is to implement demand-driven adaptive enterprise. And this will be, again, a long journey. It's not 1 year, it will be several years. And it's not only a supply chain project, it's a management project that involves a lot of people. The second goal is simple, it's easier. We want to bring our demand-driven MRP signals to production, to the shop floor. Today, the main goal of production is to finish on time, based on the basic finish date of the production orders. We want to add also the execution alerts and risks. So we want that when somebody producing production, they have to know that they are producing to replenish a buffer. They need to know which is the status of the buffer.
Yep.
We want to do it visually also in the shop floor. We want to have the same traffic lights that we have in Replenishment Plus, or in Intuiflow. We want to have it in the shop floor. And the third one is, you have mentioned in the previous presentation, we are moving towards automation. So we want to integrate vendors with some of the messages. We want to calculate buffers automatically. And we want to drive more automatic as they are doing with the plans today. So we are working in these three directions for the future.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks for that. So Ivan, you've been trying to cultivate demand-driven focus within PwC, and you've been really active in developing that strategy within the company as well. So you've kind of seen it both from this lens of the client adoption as well as, the internal organization. What perspectives could you share on either the evolution or the actions we can be taking to help things accelerate?
So two things. There have been a lot of say first touches with clients in Italy. Maybe like 100 at least in the last 2 to 3 years. 100 opening discussions around what's this new thing. It's relatively new in Italy. Very often it's the first time they see the concept and they hear the concept. And you need to perfect a little bit your storyline to get attention to this kind of interactions. And they've seen a problem that they have in Italy, that people that can understand supply chain, they often cannot decide to go demand-driven because they don't have the power to decide. And this is true. This is true for Italy. But I will use in the next ice-breaking session with a new client or prospect the sentence from Chad. So I always have said, yes, it is risky to try, but I should add now it became even riskier not to try it. And this is related to the market. What I've learned is that companies that may not be ideal for DDMRP logic, such as A2A, if you think about them, in terms of the business they are in, they like it. And once you put the right evidences in front of the decision makers, they like the approach, the simplicity, and also the usage of the tool is more visual. It's not a black box. It's something you can touch. It's something you can influence. You have all the levers on your end, and this is progressing. And we have a lot of clients now, so I'm very happy. On the internal PwC side, there have been interesting evolutions. We touched 15 countries with local capabilities of delivery, although the main competence center stands still in Italy in my team. But we have managed to kind of attract new experts in different markets. We have acquired some boutiques, supply chain boutiques. Some of them are active in the DMRP space, and this is helping a lot. Today I'm in Lisbon because tomorrow there is the operations. We call it advisory operations university, and there are like 100 partners for all the countries. And of course, I have my session on the DMRP. What are the potential advantages? How to map prospects and some success stories from the field. So it is progressing at the right level of speed, I would say.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned the different countries, and that's one thing I definitely wanted to bring up here. So, as we look at the market, I mean, we're fortunate to have clients all around the world. We're, I think, in about 40 countries now in 6 continents. And so we've seen deployments across a wide geography. But at the same time, as Carol was kind of mentioning, there still seem to be pockets of adoption that are much, much further down the road. For example, France by far in Europe is the farthest ahead. And I would say at the other end of the spectrum, we have not really seen much activity in Germany, which is the biggest economy in Europe anyway. And so I'd be interested in comments on that. You know, Carol mentioned Colombia, other countries. Is it cultural bias? What's really the root cause as to why we haven't seen more balanced or widespread adoption? Are we missing something with manufacturing associations where we're not getting the word out? Thoughts on that?
I'll take a stab at it. I think Germany and the United States, there's an interesting parallel. If I look at the United States, you've got the cradle of MRP. It's where MRP was developed. It's where it proliferated. I think the roots run deep in conventional supply chain here in the United States, and it takes a lot of disruption. You really have to pound away at those roots, so to speak.
Yep.
I think Germany, in a way, has a similar attribute, and because it has been dominated by a particular software platform, and it is what it is. But I would say that it's fantastic that software platform is DDMRP friendly, and there's an existing effort there. In fact, I would say that I would expect Germany to progress at a faster rate than even the United States coming up because of that.
Mm-hmm. Bernard, any perspectives you have? You've kind of worked in a number of these different countries. Obviously, you're based in France, so you've seen it firsthand, the adoption there. What would be your thoughts on perhaps tactics we could be executing to get more traction in some of these other less active markets?
Oh, that's a good question. If I had the answer, probably we would be progressing faster in some other countries throughout Europe.
Well, no, maybe more from the perspective of what did work in France and what can we learn from it, perhaps.
I think things progress because of people, and it happens to be that in France there's been a combination of number of individuals and supply chain consultancies and boutiques and the Fabrics Association, etc., that all at a point in time back in 2013, 2014, collaborated, to promote the concepts, get these more visible on the market, and get the ball rolling. And basically, I think, for such an approach to be legitimate, there must be several players, several competition on the market, etc. And it's very good that today there are many software companies that are supporting DMRP. There are more and more consultancies that are supporting the demand-driven movement. And I think that's one of the key of the success, and that's probably why it was so successful in France. Maybe Carol, you can complement this view.
Well, and I think you're right, Bernard. In France, it was, and I think as it is around the world, it's about the people. Eric, it goes back to what you were talking about, watching the pandemic, the spirit of the people that came together. We had an individual in France that really just took the bull by the horns, really understood the French market, understood in France that the key to getting traction there was getting through the university alumni associations. I mean, one of the very first presentations we did was late at night at École Centrale in Paris, where that is a big driver in France and the French culture. Mm-hmm. It is not in the United States. Where you went to college, nobody cares. We don't stay as tightly bound to our colleges as
unless there's a football game.
Unless there's a football game. But it's not something that we look to for our professional networking. Where in France, it's very, very strong. And I was just telling my husband, I remember I did the Laurent, we had an opening presentation. We had a member that was an alum of that university that did the presentation that said, this is good stuff, you should listen to her. I did a presentation, and then we had a case study. Well, the case study was there because this other individual said, you're going to do this. We need a small company to do this and a big company to do this. And you're the small company. and she doesn't take no for an answer. So, and that's what drove France, and we drove on that case study for a long time and really started to build a cadre, as you said, of, this community, these people that came together that said, yeah, it makes sense. I remember Bernard sitting in the first class that we taught in France. I still remember him sitting down at the end of the table. So it's all about the people. I mean, when you really come down to it, with all the technology, it comes down to the people. It goes back to the same way as Apex got started. It was a cadre of really dedicated people.
Yeah.
I think consistently we've been, Eric, we go back to 2009, 2010, and we're always saying, why isn't it going faster? Why isn't it going faster? And I think we always have to temper our expectations about, maybe there is something called too fast. And we bring up the analogy in the new book with aeronautics. Pilots fear 2 points, right? You go too fast, you disintegrate. If you go too slow, you stall. And I think when we're doing something like this, we have to keep that in mind. There is a rate of adoption and a pace that probably is more economical, more efficient, and well suited to the types of change that we're bringing, rather than just full throttle right into a wall.
Absolutely.
And that's definitely can happen.
No, for sure.
Many of us have hit that wall.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because, even in the discussions I've had with our investors over the years is that, look, guys, we're dealing with the vital organs of these clients, and they're not going to go, my metaphor is from MySpace to Facebook over the weekend. It's just not going to happen, because you screw this up, you screw the pooch, the company is really going to be in a bad place. So there's a lot of evaluation, there's checking, piloting. We do our simulations with clients and things like that, because you're dealing with such a visceral change for the company. And it kind of goes back to, Ellie's teaching about, you got to uncover the underlying assumptions that are in there. Elon Musk talks about first principle thinking, where you need to boil things down so there are no underlying assumptions. And, that fatal assumption in MRP is that we have known demand, that we have a demand signal that's reliable. Once you start to understand that there's a different way to solve that problem, it's kind of like, what Elon Musk did in SpaceX with rocketry. The way to get to reusability and drive the cost down is to learn how to land the thing on its tail, right? So that the whole booster rocket doesn't get burned up or crushed or whatever. And he was willing to fail fast and spend the money to figure out how to make it work. But once you break that boundary, now you can open up all sorts of new strategies, much the way once a client starts to appreciate that there is another way to ensure you've got the stock available so that you can pace to a more accurate signal. And I remember being at the, Apex conferences and doing this simulation in the booth back in like 13 and 14. And it was like, people started to realize, if we could just unlock that one assumption, it opens the door for lots of other opportunities. And I think we still need to champion this idea of just challenge the prevailing assumptions that are in the industry, right? That it has to be that way. Show proof points. And obviously, as your community and as the whole demand-driven community of clients is growing, the evidence that there is a better way starts to become a lot more inescapable, right? That it gets to that weight that I think it'll start to crystallize. I think this is a long range. It's going to take a decade or more to see to where we are really saturating the market with the adoption. And I do think these other markets are going to start to get on board because, like you say, it's the proof there is going to be weighty enough that it'll overcome some of the resistance that we've seen up till now.
The market's not going to leave them much of a choice, Eric. I mean, in the reality, the market's just not going to leave them a choice.
Yeah.
You get a cadre enough of large companies that have gone down this route, and small and medium companies, but when those companies are doing things that are just not possible using the traditional planning, that's when people will start to move, because they're not going to have a choice. It's either that, it gets back to you learn how to adapt or die, and you have to have agility with stability. So how do you do that?
Yep. And to me, it's just stunning to see how suppliers are asking for longer and longer lead times. I heard 600 days a couple days ago.
Yeah.
What the hell do they think they're actually going to gain out of that? right? And so, talk about supply constraints. We're going to see floods of inventory not too far down the road here because it's going to go in the other direction. And now people are going to be screaming, how we get rid of all this stuff? And a lot of it will be obsolete and expired. And, those tactics are actually moving 100% in the wrong direction. And it's rather alarming to see how widespread this strategy is being implemented. Ivan, you have a comment there?
I had a comment on the people side of making this happen, which is, of course, related to the our network, so the people that can enable transformation from the outside.
Mm-hmm.
But I would rather focus on the inside of the companies. So
Yeah.
I've seen two types of behaviors. One is, hey, I look at the potential of this. This sounds very interesting. Let me find a way to test it. That's one behavior. And the opposite behavior is, let me find a way this won't work.
Mm-hmm.
Even before I understand better what it is,
Yeah.
we are different. We don't have the full vertical integration in the value chain. So it's working on the people. Education is paramount.
Yep.
And to your point, what can we do? I think we can. Our community should keep on pushing hard on education, events, communication. And because these need to be perceived from the mass market of the supply chain planners that are acting in the companies. So that's all about people.
Yep.
Yeah, I will recap.
Sorry. Yeah.
So I will recap in some of the options you have mentioned before. So I think first of all, we need to understand who approves these projects.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, is the CFO and is the supply chain director or president. And we need to adapt the language to the CFO. So when I was selling the project here in Merler, Toledo, I cannot explain that if you increase the flow, then you're going to increase the cost velocity, and then you're going to increase the net profit. So I was selling that besides the current programs that they have to avoid costs, and they have been very successful, we have a new opportunity to increase the revenue, and this one is increasing the flow. Yeah. So we need to understand to whom we have to sell the product. The second thing is something that I observed in France. The supply chain, the France supply chain organization is very powerful, and they are promoting demand-driven MRP. I think you will have to go to each country main supply chain organizations and promote this new planning methodology. And the third one is the universities. So demand-driven MRP has to be a subject at some point in the industrial engineer, in the economic university. When I studied MRP1, MRP2, even MRP3. Demand-driven MRP should be also part of the subject. Yeah. So you will need to convince also the university to be part of the program that they teach in the university. If you do that also, I think if we are able to adapt the language to the CFO and the person that has to prove this, if we promote as you promote in France demand-driven MRP, and also if they are in the university, it will be much easier and this will accelerate much more the implementation of demand-driven MRP.
Bernard, you had a comment?
Yeah, I wanted to maybe to emphasize as well that we need to make sure companies understand it's not risky. It's just rooted in common sense and good practices that have been developed for decades and improved over time. And I'm not in favor of touting this is a new paradigm, etc., because really it's evolving from existing good practices that have been developed over time. And for some companies, it may be a bit scary to get into new paradigms in the new normal we are living. The other thing I wanted to emphasize is that very often we got some pushbacks of industrial companies, manufacturing companies, because they couldn't see how to really handle level loading, capacity management, etc. And I think it's important now that we really get into a comprehensive demand-driven operating model that properly addresses those legitimate concerns of best using our capacities to support customer demands.
Yeah. Yep. Look, we've got a time for, I think, one more question. And I want to come back to something that I don't remember if we brought this up last year, but my own observation is that we're in an industry that is, or a solution segment, whatever words you want to use, that is rather complex. When you look at the diverse range of manufacturing environments that are out there, it's really incredible. And there's a lot of ingenuity and innovation that's been done to help companies create products and the ways of working and all of these things. And yet it seems that the industry pundits, if you will, and I'm thinking of Gartner and others, the analysts like, who, kind of took a look at the demand-driven methods and said, these are too simple. And yet I think fundamentally we should be very careful not to fall in the trap that we need to solve complexity with more complexity, right? The idea is not to make it more complex. The clients that I met with Valeri and with Bernard on our trip over in Europe a couple of weeks ago, one of the biggest challenges they worry about is that the existing tools are so complicated and hard to use. It's hard because the users aren't ready for that, or they're not skilled enough, or whatever. There's lots of other factors here. And how can we get people to realize that the right answer isn't to make it more complicated in software or other tools, but to actually go the other direction, take that complexity and distill it down so that it's much easier to work with and manage. Chad, your thoughts on this? I know you've had the discussions with our friends at Gartner and the like. What's your perspective?
I don't think that this is a new problem. I think that engineers and human beings in general, civilizations have been grappling with this since the beginning of time. It's why we have a word called elegance, right? Elegance is simple and significant. And usually all the best innovations and evolutions come from some elegant solution. You have to ask yourself, whose interest is it to push complexity? That's the question, is who wins if we make it more complex? I mean, follow the money. Okay. It was every situation in human existence, just follow the money and it will lead you to the answer.
Yeah. Ivan, you got any thoughts on this?
I think that there is this thing of, how can I say, protection. So every company out there has invested a lot of money in supply chain planning softwares. Every bad consultant, including myself, have magnificated words such as 1 kilo of artificial intelligence will make your forecast very accurate, and 2 kilos of machine learning will solve your inventory sizing problems. Believe me. So I think that this story proved wrong over time. I mean, not completely wrong. Maybe this is one problem. So some complexity has helped. What I've understood is sometimes we see very basic data missing in supply chains, and this shocks me every time. Even large companies has like, what's the lead time of this? 20 days. Are you sure? I don't know. Who put the data in? We don't know. What was the last time you checked this data accuracy?
Yeah.
We never did it. Yeah. So sometimes level of knowledge is so low and there is a black box on a low level of knowledge, and there is a group of actors in the market of services and software that are making money out of that. And the only thing that can change these are results. So I think that when I pitch for a new prospect, I always show the slides of the early adopters of the DMRP. This is a very reassuring slide, typically, because once you scare them saying it's a new paradigm, because it is a new thing, you need to tell that because it's a new thing. Then you must add by those guys, even big guys, have already tried and succeeded with that.
Yeah.
And once this inertia is inverted, and then it will become too risky not to try.
Yeah. Absolutely. Any other final comments on this question? We're right at our time. Anybody have a final 2 cents to add to the discussion here? Valerie, how about you?
Well, I have to pop in on that one, Eric. It's always amazing to me how people that don't have any understanding, have not done any of the education, have never read the book, can criticize. And it's very simple to make things complex, and it's very difficult and takes a great deal of time to make things elegant. I mean, this is one of the reasons why it took 3 years to write that sales and operations planning book. I mean, we had it done twice, and we kept tearing through it. And, a real call out to Chad that he went through it very meticulously to make it elegant. And that's the difficult part. And one of our affiliates, who's also an affiliate of yours, had a consultation with one of those companies that declared that, demand driven is too simple. And he said, and this was the alleged expert in demand driven. He says, so you obviously know who Chad Smith and Carol Ptak are. And he said, no, I have no idea who they are. So that tells you how versed they are in the demand-driven methodologies, given that Chad and I have written every book that's on the subject. So it's always interesting. As Chad said, follow the money. Easy to make things complex, difficult to make things elegant.
One piece of advice for companies that are looking to make dramatic improvement in this kind of world: the solution you are buying or should buy, that value proposition, that solution should not be, we'll think for you. That's never anything you want to buy. Okay. You have to think for yourself, and otherwise lasting change will never come to the organization.
Mm-hmm.
You can't take that power away from the organization and expect good things to happen.
Yeah. I would qualify that a little bit. I'll test this with you. I think the thinking that we want to be doing are on the critical and strategic things. What we shouldn't have to be thinking about is checking the math of the system, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we too often see, is that literally we have people using these very expensive ERP systems, and the primary job is to check the math. And if they don't agree with the math, they're going to change the order, right? And that's because then they don't. That evolves into that whole spreadsheet story and things like that. So I think it's about directing our attention and focus and thinking to the right issues, not all of the issues, right? And
well, it's the idea of a black box is it sounds inviting, but in reality, it's just disenfranchises you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Why? Because you don't know why it's saying what it's saying, and because it's proprietary. Well, okay, they're in. All the bad stuff begins. Right?
Absolutely. Yep. And that's where I think having systems that are transparent and clear and user-friendly enough to digest, so that you understand, as Ellie always talked about, is I want to make sure we always have clear linkage between cause and effect, right?
Yeah.
Once you give that to people, then they have a tangible grip on what's happening, and they gain a lot more confidence and trust in whatever their system recommendations are. Look, I really, really appreciate all of your participation. I think this was a pretty riveting panel discussion. Congratulations to all of you for your great insights and perspectives that you shared. I want to thank our audience for your participation in the conference. We will be following up with material, videos, presentations, you name it. And obviously, we're all here interested to help you on your demand-driven journey. So with that, We'll close the session. Best wishes to you all. Stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you soon. Thanks, everybody.
Ciao. Ciao, ciao.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.